one who was very involved throughout the years in the Chof and Chof Sivan, and was involved in the Kovetz Chof Sivan, which has been a big Chof in Yeshiva lately. So we'd like to call upon a shliach from Monroe Township, New Jersey, Rabbi Leizer Zaklikovsky.
What happened to the Beis Medrash? Got him. Huh? Why not the boys? Hi. When I was a bacher in Leizer with your Menal, Rabbi Shapiro, if there would be any kind of program during supper, him and I would not be there. So it's nice, very nice. So I'm not sure why I was specifically called, but after a certain amount of pressure from these guys, I kind of cave in. So the time is short. I guess just a little bit of the history of the Yom Tov of Chasidim. This is not one of the Rebbe's Yom Tovim that was celebrated all of the years during the Rebbe's Nesias. Most of the years no one knew about this day. In Hayom Yom, so the first reprint after Tavshin Gimel, when it came out the first time, they included for the first time not only the biography of all of the Rabbeim, but also of the Rebbe. And in the Rebbe's biography it said, Tavshin Aleph, Sivan, Baldwin, New York. That the Rebbe arrived during the month of Sivan Tavshin Aleph. So that was the first public knowledge of the month that the Rebbe arrived to America, and that it was significant. Because if it wasn't significant, it wouldn't have been included there. Because obviously something that came out in those years was with the Rebbe's knowledge and the Rebbe's approval of Mechulu. But it still doesn't give you a date, so you don't know anything more. And we grew up basically not knowing when the Rebbe came. We knew when the Frierdiker Rebbe came, Tess Adar, but not when the Rebbe came. In the early mems, the Rebbe gave Ber Levin, the chief librarian of the Rebbe's library, the job of preparing the letters from all the Rabbeim for print. And he started with the Alter Rebbe. Middle Rebbe and Tzemach Tzedek. At that time it was only one volume. Now each Rebbe has its own volume. And then it continued to the Frierdiker Rebbe's Igris. Tavshin Mem Beis, Tavshin Mem Gimel. And today there's a total of 16, 17 volumes of the Frierdiker Rebbe's Igris. At that time it was just starting. So it was going according to the order of the years. And Chelek Hey from Igris Kodesh, or the Frierdiker Rebbe, covers the 2 years of Tavshin and Tavshin Aleph, which is when the Frierdiker Rebbe arrived and the Rebbe arrived. So before each volume of Igris, there's a Mavoi, an introduction. And Ber 11 goes through the events that took place during that year or two. And he explains, by quoting from the letters that are being printed in this volume, what was the history of Chabad, of that particular Rebbe during that year. So there's a whole introduction about the rescue of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and then the rescue of the Rebbe. One of the letters from the Frierdiker Rebbe in that volume is a letter written on Chof Sivan Tavshin Aleph. Today we know the letter, it's famous. The Rebbe writes to Radam Rabinovich. He was a chassid that was living in Massachusetts. And he writes that I'm happy to notify you that today, Chof Sivan, my daughter and her husband, the Rebbe's name, arrived Tzleicha successfully, La'artze Sabris. There's a whole story of how these letters arrived. I'm not going to go into it right now. I had a good friend, Moshe Groner, Alav Shalom, and he used to collect kisvei yad and pictures to give them as gifts to the Rebbe. And he knew that this old man, Rabinovich, had a big archive of letters. He worked very hard to get it, and ultimately he got it, and he brought it to the Rebbe. The original letters that he got, because some letters were kept in the archive from the Maskiros, but these were the letters that were received with the signatures. The Rebbe was very happy to get the file of all of Radam Rabinovich's letters. This Radam Rabinovich, his son, Usher Arthur, was a lawyer, and he was involved in the rescue effort. So he was going back and forth to Washington. It's a whole long story, going back to the Hatzalah of Yudis Tammuz, and then the Frierdiker Rebbe's arrival in America, and then the Rebbe's arrival in America. And the Frierdiker Rebbe looked to acknowledge to his father the efforts that he made, that his son made, in rescuing his son-in-law and his daughter, the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin, when they came to America. So that's the letter that's written on Chof Sivan. So being that this archive of letters is now in the Rebbe's library, the Rebbe sends it over to the library. So Ber 11 chooses to include in the Igros Kodesh this letter, a photograph of this letter, a facsimile. The Krach of Igros comes out in the summer of Tavshin Mem Gimel. Olam Beilam, nobody chamsich b'chlal. Another volume of Igros comes out. You know, Ber 11 can print Sfarim overnight. And you can't really keep up because it's a lot to read and a lot to study and a lot to involve yourself in the history. So when the next year Chof Sivan comes, nobody puts the two and two together. That here's a letter from the Frierdiker Rebbe that came out a few months before in the Igros with a copy of it in the front, and Chof Sivan just goes by. The next year, Tavshin Mem Hey, so the Igros comes out in the summer of Mem Gimel, Mem Dalet goes by with no celebration. Tavshin Mem Hey, the day before Chof Sivan, a guy Yossel Solomon arrives from Eretz Yisrael, and he walks into the Zal upstairs, and he shows the Bachrim. Don't you see the letter here from Chof Sivan, Tavshin Aleph, the day that Rebbe arrived? That's going to be tonight. I mean, how? It's like that. So the Bachrim like, this is what do we do? So they said, the Rebbe's going to come out tonight. If Rebbe was upstairs, they'll sing a niggin. Usually they didn't sing songs. The Rebbe came in upstairs to davening. It was quiet. The Rebbe walked in. The door slammed, closed. The Rebbe opened the siddur. Quiet. Later, in the later years, downstairs, as the Rebbe walked through the whole shul, they sang. But in those years, it didn't happen. So they decided they're going to sing the Rosh Chodesh Kislev niggin, which was also quite new, only a year or two before. They figured the niggin was made up for the Rebbe's Yizund, for a celebration of the Rebbe's Hatzalah. So it's a masim niggin that's masim for Chof Sivan. And they attempted to sing the song when the Rebbe came into Meir, and the Rebbe made with his hand. Oh, this for the Bachrim was already a green light. That night they farbrenged upstairs in the Zal, the whole night. The various Bachrim that were there share their recollections. They sing, they dance, they danced up the tish. calling it smart, they went outside, they jumped on the mitzvah tanks, the hulu hulu. Chof Sivan is being celebrated in Lubavitch for the first time in 1985. Just so happens that that year Chof Sivan was on Monday, which is the way it was in Tafshin Aleph. 2 days later, on Rosh Chodesh, Tammuz, the Rebbe calls in the members of Agudas Sidei Chabad for Yechidus, and he breaks the news to them about the parsha of the Sforim, which you all know what that is today, which started Pesach and then Shavuos, Tavshin Mem Hey. So it's everything's Hashgacha Pratis. Chof Sivan is celebrated, and then, of course, we all know that the court case represents the issue of the Rebbe's Benkel, the Rebbe's Nesias, and this was substantiated with the Rebbe coming to America on Chof Sivan. So it's very much connected. Then you Beis Tammuz, we all know the Rebbe came out in public on cable television, at the Farbrengen. I'll never forget, we were in camp in Detroit, and the only way to watch the cable television was by a motel in Greeley. We took 2 motel rooms, and the whole camp sat on 2 double beds and on the floor. And we were able to watch the Farbrengen on the television. And all of a sudden, the Rebbe was talking about 70 prostitutes, and we had no clue what was going on. It was like completely, no one knew anything. We didn't know about the Yechidus even. So that's literally a couple days after Chof Sivan is celebrated for the first time by a few Bachrim. The next year, Tavshin Mem Vov, so the Bachrim talked to Meir Harlig about doing a Farbrengen, like he does for the Shvedish Kislev, so does he do? No, he doesn't want to do it. Shvedish Kislev is my thing. We can't just einführen da neue Minhagim. And they're pressuring him, and they're talking to him, listen, Chof Sivan is the Rebbe's Hatot. Okay. So he finally is convinced to do it. But he's not going to give it a bottle of mashke to the Rebbe. That time there was a mini, but if there was an event going on in Chabad, you give it a bottle of mashke, the Rebbe would pour a little bit into his becher by the Farbrengen and give it for the event as a yishtatfus. He's not going to do that. But the Bachrim gave in a bottle to Maskiros for this Farbrengen. Until last minute, obviously the Bachrim themselves didn't want to be the ones to go up to the Rebbe to get it. And Harlig said he's not going to do it. They were in a conundrum. And then the Rebbe spoke the famous Sikha, which is printed in the Kovetz, about Yefutza Meinesecha Chutza, Chatzikad Ratach, and it was very obvious that the Rebbe was referring to Chof Sivan, even though he was talking about the Frierdiker Rebbe. So after that Sikha, so Harlig already motioned to the Bachrim, don't worry, I'll do it. And when it was time to go up for the bottle, so he went up, and as the custom was, the Rebbe would pour you a little bit of l'chaim and then wait for you to announce what's the event. So Rabbi Harlig announced, since I'm a Grace of Farbrengen, the talk was the Rebbe is becoming in America. And the Rebbe turns around to him with a big smile and he says, Ishu Beisek. So he doesn't know anything. He says, Alle seien eingeladen zu kommen zu der Farbrengen, Ishu Beisek. They right away corrected him, and as they're correcting him, the Rebbe has a massive smile from ear to ear. And then he corrected himself that the Rebbe really meant to say Yishuv Beisei. And that was the first big celebration of Chof Sivan. And from then on, it became basically a day to Farbrengen by Sivan. I just happened to find by me a Shura that came out 2 years later, Chof Sivan Tavshin Mem Ches. Right here. Somebody asked me for a copy of something. The Bachrim made for the Farbrengen. And in it is the Sikha that the Rebbe spoke in Tavshin Mem Vav that I just mentioned, plus the letter that's in the Yigdus Kodesh, and stories from some of the elders who remember when the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin arrived that morning on Chof Sivan. From this year, they started to give into the Rebbe a mimer to be Magia for Chof Sivan, and the Rebbe was Magia. Kuntras Chof Sivan, Tavshin Al Ches, Tavshin Al Tes, Tavshin Nun. Then comes Tavshin Nun Aleph, it's going to be 50 years. So, as a Bocher, we wanted to do something special, kind of next level. And the year before, there had been a Kovetz for Yud Shvat Tavshin Nun, for Arbaim Shana, that was printed by Kahas. So I figured, maybe we should do something for Chof Chesiv in Yevel Shana. So during that time, although I wasn't on the Torah, but I was working on the Yemei Bereshis. It's a Yuman from Tavshin Yud and Yudal, I don't know if you've seen it. It's been out of print for many years. So I was working with Rabbi Krinsky quite closely, and I mentioned to him this idea that I wanted to do something for Chof Chesiv, and what he thought about it. We gathered together the Sichos, the Maimorim, and give it out. So he said he thinks it's a good idea. I don't see why not. And I should speak to one of the vads that do it. And he suggested that I go to Sivan Jacobson. It's Bad Nachzat Mimim at the time. They used to publish the Sichos in Yiddish. So I went straight upstairs to him, and I told him that I had this idea. This is a couple weeks before Chof Sivan. We're busy. We're doing they do the Mogitik Sicha every week, and this, and Techen Kotzer, and another project. And I said, we're going to do it. We just need someone to facilitate it. We need an office to facilitate it, but I'll take a responsibility for everything. And he says, okay. Let's see what we can put together. And of course, we have to ask to have permission. I had also been friends at that time with a fellow by the name of Deitch, who had in his possession a big archive of documents with regards to the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe's rescue from Europe. He got it from the family of Kramers. Sam Kramer was the lawyer that was involved at that time. And B'derech Leizer had arrived by him. And every week I used to go to him, he would show me the documents, the letters going back and forth. And it was fascinating. So I remembered that he had the documents. So I mentioned to Sivan Jacobson, I know this guy that has all the documents. Maybe we could put together a little bit of a tildes of how the Rebbe was actually rescued. That'd be fascinating if you could get something like that. So I went to meet with him. And he takes me out a whole pile of stuff and says, go read it. You have to understand, if you don't know what's going on, it's like you're in the middle of nowhere. Where, what, who sent which telegram, for what reason, to whom. It's like a whole involved story. So I sat with him Friday night until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, at least to familiarize myself with the parsha, and then continue in the following days. And he agreed to finally allow us to take copies of it, so I can bring it to Bad Nachzat Mimim and see what we can do. There was a Bocher in 77, they don't want to mention his name, that was a very talented writer. And I summoned him and I asked him if he would get involved. And he agreed. And we started to leaf through all of these documents and read them and try to figure out what's going on and what's the story here. Not having even the furthest hope that the Rebbe would even, the Rebbe to give this out it was not even on the radar. And slowly but surely we're putting together this little diary of the events that led up to Chof Sivan, based on these documents that we got from him. So at this point we basically know what's going to be in the Kovetz. We got together the 4 Kontresim, the few Sichos from Tavshin Mem Vav, Tavshin Mem Tes, Tavshin Nun Tes Oder was 50 years, the Rebbe was Magia Sicha. And I started to interview some of the older people about the first Farbrengen that the Rebbe had Thursday night when he came to America. So Chof Sivan was on Monday. The Rebbe arrived. I'm not going to go into all the details of the Hatzalah. I'm sure you can read that. You should read that. And if you have read that, you read it again. There's a Rishim that the Rebbe writes on Yud Zayin Sivan, the day he goes onto the ship. Ein Ben David Ba, and which we only found out later. So Yud Zayin Sivan, the Rebbe goes onto the ship, the Surco Pinto, and it arrives 10:30 a.m. on Chof Sivan at the pier in Staten Island. I'm sure you'll all go there on Chof Sivan this year, for 8 years. So the night before, Sunday night, the Frierdiker Rebbe calls in 4 of the older Chassidim, Shmuel Levitin, plus 3 who were involved with the Hatzalah. We saw Jacobson, Kazunovsky. And he tells them that they should go to be Mekabel Ponim, his Eidim, who's arriving tomorrow. And then he tells them some of his credentials. Boki, and Shas, Bavli, mit alle Ran, Rish, Rosh, und Riv, und Yerushalmi, and Chassidus, alle Chassidische Sfarim, the Kudatera, mit alle Eins, etc. It's all printed. So they went to pick him up, together with Frierdiker Rebbe's wife and daughter. And they came back in 2 taxis, 2 separate taxis. The American boys who were learning that in 770. Americus, which is today Maskiros, was a classroom. The Frierdiker Rebbe had said that all the Bachram should go out to be Mekabel Ponim. The Rebbe came. Their teacher was Zalman Gorari. He gave the Rebbe Shalom. That continued with the other boys. And they gave the Rebbe the respect that he deserved. There's a whole story about when the Rebbe first went to see the Frierdiker Rebbe. He didn't go right away that day. He was waiting to be called. It's what we heard from Gershon Bar Jacobson, for whatever it's worth. Thursday the Rebbe benches Goimel, and he's called in to the Frierdiker Rebbe separately from the Rebbe. And Thursday night, there's a Farbrengen in 770 to honor their arrival, which the Rebbe attends. So we started to gather together little bits and pieces of the Farbrengen. Label Poles to remember that the Rebbe asked at the Bachram Zayin Klor Leputi Diburim. Fogelman from Worcester remembered that the Rebbe asked people their names and he expounded upon it and he spoke about their boy, etc., etc. So we put together a lot of these. And we gave it to the Rebbe, I think it was Friday of the week before, Erev Shabbos, Baloischa, the plan for the Kovetz of Chassid and Yevil Shana. On Sunday, the Rebbe gave an answer. Ki hanholas aguch v'tza aguch v'yehei b'atzlacha rabba. In accordance with the leadership of Agudas Chassidic Chabad and Tzirei Agudas Chabad, and it should be with much success. It really was like a little bit. The Rebbe should get involved on such a level. It was like the first sign that there's something special here, So we went to David Raskin, because David Raskin had the distinction of being both a member of Aguch and Tza Aguch. And we asked him permission. The Rebbe said, Tza Aguch. And he discussed it with his boards. And he came back to us and he said that we should give it to another few people to look over. And go ahead. Which is what we did. Gave it to another few people to look over. At that time it took on like a life of its own already. It became like a whole introduction, as you see in Pesher HaYoim. I was very, very strong on putting in some of the documents as well. So I remember cleaning up this document, the letter from Butler, the lawyer, to get out all of the black lines from the photostat. It wasn't like today that you could scan something in, clean it up in Photoshop. You had to literally take liquid paper and cover over every black dot. There was a lot of black dots, there was a lot of liquid paper. It took a long time, and you got paint on your hands, etc. But I wanted it to look nice, and we chose 3 documents to include. The letter, the famous letter to Radam Rabinovich, as I mentioned. One of the letters of the lawyer, which was amongst hundreds that I got from this guy. And the letter from the Rebbetzin and the Rebbe in Russian that was printed in Yemei Melech. And by the time Friday of the next week came, it was ready to go to print. So we prepared a Pesach Davar and gave it into the Rebbe. On Sunday morning before Shacharis, the folder comes out from the Rebbe. Mohir. Mohir means rush. The Rebbe writes a date on the Pesach Davar. Erev Chof Sivan. Erev Chof Sivan. That means Chof Sivan is like Erev Yom. Not Chof Zayin Sivan. It's Erev Chof Sivan. And then he also wrote Betach Yagihu Eidapam. Eidapam. The whole thing was maybe a couple pages. I mean, I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds of pages. And here again, it was like a little bit of a. So at that time, Heshkin Dabrowski was one of the big mumchim. So we gave it to him, and we gave it to Heshkin Gansburg, and others. Somebody had suggested, why don't we include the Tilbus from the Rebbe that's printed in the beginning of Ayenge? So the secretary asked the Rebbe if that would be okay, and the Rebbe said yeah. So we immediately started typing that up in Empire Press. At that time they were the main printers in Chabad. There was no in-house printing like today. Everyone has a computer as a printer. And this is Sunday. We're running back and forth. We're trying to arrange. I'm bringing it to this guy a copy so he could look over. I'm bringing it to Empire Press to type up. I'm making copies of the Tildas to bring it in. I believe it was Monday morning that we heard that the Rebbe asked to print 10,000 books because he's going to give it out Monday night. I mean, you have to understand what this is like. A few pishers in a Latera are putting together a Kovetz. The Rebbe says to print 10,000 books to be ready after Ma'ariv to give out. It like wasn't believable. It wasn't realistic. It was like such a shock. It was like, what do we do now? So we had to get Vadla Fonsechichis involved. They were the ones that printed all the cases that the Rebbe gave out. And they basically took it over from there. That was already out of our hands. The Rebbe was giving it out. It's already above my pay grade, as I say. But we were like in a different oil. It was like, there was no words. The fact that the Rebbe Onginum and Azach, Bachrim put together, not only agreed that it should be given out and published, but that he himself would give it out. Thousands. The Rebbe went to the oil that day, Monday. Sunday was dollars, Monday he stood the oil. Once dollars became very long, the Rebbe stood the oil Sunday after dollars. Started to go Monday. And we had heard that the Rebbe wanted that the bracha that the older Chassidim were going to give the Rebbe for Chof Sivan, rather than it taking place in the Gan Eden Atachton, as it was all the years, it should take place downstairs in shul, in public, after Ma'ariv.
When did the bracha start?
On Chof Sivan, it didn't start, I think it's the first time. Vidal Nissim was all the years, but that year, Nun Aleph, also the bracha was downstairs, the first time. The Rebbe said it should be like Vidal Nissim. The test was downstairs? So he wanted it should be like Vidal Nissim downstairs. So the Rebbe comes back from the oil. The plan was to tell the Rebbe that the books are not ready yet, the Rebbe will go upstairs after Ma'ariv and be telling him something, and then after a hafsaka he'll come down. Why? Because a few weeks before, on Tesvav here, the story with the Dvar Malchus that now everybody knows is that they told the Rebbe that the books are not ready yet, and it was Bahav, so the Rebbe went upstairs, they announced the hafsaka, and the Rebbe came down a half hour later. So they figured that this would be the perfect thing. The Rebbe will come down, have a minute of Ma'ariv, the Baracha, whatever, then he'll make a hafsaka. However, the Rebbe did not want that. I mean, we all know what happened. There's videos of it. The bracha, the Rebbe's face was very, very, very special. The bracha was very long bracha, and the Rebbe was very intent. The response to the bracha, the sikha, was also extraordinary. It's muga, it's at least he's there, like, on a different level. Long story short, after they announced that there would be a hefsek, so the Rebbe said, "Sashal Yitzhak, we'll stop machna hefsek and machna hefsek." The Rebbe went downstairs to the same place where the bracha was, by the Dallas table, and he spoke for another 10 minutes. And by that time, they realized they got to get those books out because the Rebbe started to give them out. And the Rebbe started to give out the Kovetz. It took 3 hours till 12:30 at night. And obviously, we were like on air. Dancing wasn't
Videos
the
on
word. It was like, well, I see the time is short. The lesson here is quite simple. Chof Sivan came B'Yisarus de Lasata with a tremendous chizuk from Yisarus de Leila in a way that is unprecedented. How the Rebbe was misyachas to his own yomtiv, with the sichis, the maimorim, with the brachas, with the chalukas, in such an open way. And obviously, it's because the Rebbe wanted to share his personal Chag HaGeula, Chag HaAtzola with Sivan. Because it's important, because it's not only the Rebbe's personal day, it's our day as Chassidim of the Rebbe, as it says in the Pesach Davar, since Hanasi Hu HaKol. So every single person of the generation has the obligation to celebrate this day, because if it wasn't for this day, we would have all been affected. How to do that, I'm going to leave it to the Mashpim and to the Rosh Yeshivas. But there's no question that the Sichos and the Memorim that the Rebbe gave out, that should be clear for everybody. It's not even a question. The four Memorim and the Sichos from Tasoder, and even the Tildes, to know exactly the whole story, how it went down. The Rebbe decided to give it out to everybody. He could have said, take that part out and only stay with the Sichos and the Memorim. He chose to include in the book that he gave out to everyone the biography of all the details of how he got the visa and how they transferred the visa from Nice to Marseille and how it didn't work, and then they got the first tickets and the Finikabel all of a sudden last minute said not to go, and then they got the other tickets for Bistritsky and all the whole adichis HaTorah that everyone wanted. Every single chassid should have it, every single child, every single woman, by gifting them this Kovetz with the story. It's not something that happened 30 years ago, it's something that happens now, because obviously, even though you weren't physically there to get a Kovetz from the Rebbe, the inyan itself, the experience is an inyan mitzvah. So the Kovetz is yours, and it's being given by the Rebbe to every single chassid on same holidays. So now you being the soldiers on the front line, the soldaten, the kinder, it's your responsibility to take that inspiration and to renew it, and to revive it, and to excite the whole entire world, starting with your own yeshiva and going on for the rest of Chabad and the Shluchim and the Hanash and all Klal Yisrael b'chol about the Yisraelis of this game Zakai, as the Rebbe calls it, the game Zakai of Chof Sivan. I just want to add one little last thing on a personal note, because we're also preparing for Gimel Tammuz. That is that little connection between Chof Sivan and Gimel Tammuz. During that time, as I mentioned, I was working on the Yemei Bereshis. And I really wanted that the Sefer should be ready for Chof Sivan because it was Gable Shanim and it was an important day. And I'm not going to go into all the details, there was maybe a few sikhs. But the Pesach Dover was ready just around Chof Sivan. And I figured what better date to get on this Pesach Dover than Chof Sivan Gable Shanim. So I prepared the Pesach Dover, and you leave the date open for the Rebbe to fill in. So under the date, Hey Tov Shnur Aleph, the date was left empty. I wrote in Yovel Shonim L'Bayich Tvei Tushad Murshlita, because obviously the date's going to be Chof Sivan, so you write Yovel Shonim. And then I attached the zettel to the Pesach Dover. And the date of the zettel was Erev Chof Sivan. And then I wrote the Kesher L'Yem Abar Chof Sivan Gable Shonim. I'm presenting here the Pesach Dover of the book Yimei Bereishis, which is going into print the Kovetz Chof Sivan. So how many more mentions do you need of Chof Sivan? It's in the Pesach Dover, and it's in the zettel, and it's in the date of the zettel. And I gave it on Sunday. I gave it Sunday. After Dallas, Rabbi Krinsky used to go into the Rebbe. So as he was going downstairs to go into the Rebbe, I handed him the Pesach Dover. The next morning it came out. I'm Chof Sivan. Wait by it. Chof Sivan Yevil Shach. And he hands me the folder. I immediately open it up to look at the date. And the Rebbe writes, first he writes Yom Aleph Parsha Chukas. And then he crosses it out. And on top of it he writes Vov Erev Shabbos Kodesh Parsha Shlach. The Chof Sivan. It just so happens that Yom Aleph Parsha Chukas was Yom Tammuz. And on a positive note, talked about the fact that Bochrim have their part in giving the Nachas Ruach. So I immediately ran and I put in the Rebbe made another correction to the Pesach Dover as well on the date. And I ran to Williamsburg and I had a few copies bound, just photostats of the book. And I wanted to make it back in time to give one to Rabbi Krinsky to give to the Rebbe on the way to the oil, because the Rebbe would be going to the oil Monday. And I wrote a little settle in the front, which I paper clipped into the first page of the book, and it sort of was the Yimei Bereishis, it's about to go to print. And these are photostats that we just want to show the Rebbe the prototype of what it looks like. And I gave it to him as he was going into the car. And I saw that when he came to the first light by Kingston Avenue, he handed the Rebbe the book. And the Rebbe put on his glasses and started to read it. The Rebbe came back from the oil, was the whole sikha, with the bracha, with the chalukah and everything. So it took a while until I was able to find Rabbi Krinsky. I went upstairs to his office, in the middle of the chalukah, to find out what happened to me. Maybe the Rebbe said, don't bring the book. Maybe who knows what's going on. So he tells me, Leizer, the Rebbe was looking at it the whole entire way to the oil, and he stayed sitting in the car for 15-20 minutes while he was by the oil until he finished the entire book. I said, what happened to the book? He said, here. It's the bag, the paper bag that Rebbe brought back from the oil, and in the bag is the book. So I said, can I take it? He said, yeah. So sign it. Rebbe gave it back to me. Give it. So the Chilur Ra'ada, I bent down to take out the book, the Sefer, and I want to see the zettel that's in the front. So I open it up, no zettel. I said, Rabbi Krinsky, do you know anything about the zettel? He said, tell me anything about the zettel. I don't know if I should know about the zettel. He gave me the book to give to Rebbe, I gave it to him. Okay. So obviously, we verbring the whole night that night. And long story short, the next morning, Rabbi Krinsky calls me in our room. Me and Rabbi Chaim Shapiro were very fancy. We had a telephone line in our dorm room in 824 East Park. The phone is ringing. Rabbi Krinsky's on the phone. You should give Hashem Legolas. Rabbi Chalal for years never missed a Shachris by the Rebbe. But obviously with Chof Sivan, this was like. Anyway, he says he's about the Rebbe's going to go. It's Rosh Chodesh the next day also. But the settle that was in the book, he says, the Rebbe took it back in 770, and the next day, the next morning, the Rebbe sent it out to Rabbi Krinsky with another few settlers that he had given him. And here again, the date was festive of the settle. The Rebbe circled it around and said, the Skabel B'tach, the Dover B'itei, Vazman Grama, an arrow to the date. When I wrote the Yirotz and Sheniskil Ligrein Nachas Ruach, the Rebbe added in his pencil, Rav.